Palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Anyone here for the first time? Those who are here for the first time, welcome. What brings you here? If you want to share, now that I already got your hand up.
Okay. I just say, I'm very curious. I want to just explore.
Yeah, curious about.
Deepening my spirituality.
Yeah.
Being honest with myself.
Yeah. I think I'll come back to that story in a second, but thank you for sharing that. Being honest with ourselves is tough. I'll come back to that. And then it's not tough. And then it's scary, and then it's funny. But I still don't want to tell the story yet. Go right ahead.
I was with a group of people when we watched the movie Source. And that's part of what they were talking about, the meditation, and we talked about it afterwards. And I said, I can't meditate. You know, sit down and maybe for a few seconds, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And so a friend of mine was there, and he told me about this place, and he said, you should come and check it out.
Nice.
So,
well, we're glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Anyone else new want to share why? We're both staring at each other. One of you should talk.
I like meditation and don't know too much about Buddhism, so
Yeah.
we can check it out.
Nice. Welcome. And along for support?
I guess I feel like I'm at a place in my life where I'm wanting to delve more into like spiritual things and like feel the need for that in my life. So,
Yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I always, when I said along for support, whenever I see people who come with someone, which, you know, you're both kind of interested in this, but whenever I see people who come with someone, I always warn them because 21 years ago, I went with someone to explore a little strange Buddhist temple because they were doing their teaching credentials at San Diego State. She was my best friend since childhood and said, you always talk about being Buddhist, you always say you're Buddhist. You know, you've never even been to a Buddhist temple. You want to go with me? So I went, and 21 years later, here I am. So be careful when you show up at places like these for the first time. They can completely ruin your life forever.
And your wardrobe.
And your wardrobe. It'll ruin your life, your wardrobe. You'll get rid of boats. End up in the middle of the ocean with nothing. And if you're lucky, you might even eventually be at peace.
Not getting bad driving.
If you're lucky. But, you know, give it time. So the story I was going to tell, it was interesting because I wasn't going to tell it. I initially thought about telling it, and then I wasn't. And then when you said that, it was just, to me, clear that I needed to say it. Anyone, I'm going to use kind of a vulgar word here. Any children in the room, other than Theo up in the front row? All right. So somebody just came in, and as often, many of you know, we have recovery groups as well at this temple. So anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, life, whatever it might be, and a lot of them end up in the non-recovery classes, and a lot of people who are in non-recovery classes end up in the recovery classes because realize they should be. And so there's a lot of crossover in the Dharma Bum Temple world of, you know, recovery-based classes and non-recovery-based classes. And ultimately, they're addressing the exact same thing. Obviously, our recovery programs are very specifically targeted towards, you know, one who is an addict. So it's very direct towards that. But like I said, a lot of crossover. So an individual just walked in as I was coming in, and they were wrapping up a conversation with our wonderful host, Dharma Bum host, Anna, and I kind of heard the tail end of it of, you know, which should I go to? It was their first time here, upstairs or downstairs. And then this individual said that they were terrible at making a decision, so they turned to me, obviously first time here, having no idea who I was, meaning the person who would lead the class, and they said, which one should I go to, upstairs and downstairs? And my response was, and I roughly quote, something to the effect of, definitely go downstairs because the guy who leads upstairs is an asshole. And this person looked at me and said something to the effect of, great, I'm an asshole too. And I said, hi, I'm Jeff, nice to meet you, I lead the upstairs class. And this person said something to the effect of, we'll get in, we'll fit along great, I like you already, just don't tell anyone. So what made me think of that was, it really is a big part of really any spiritual journey, whether it's meditation, Buddhist practice, church, whatever it might be, is kind of coming to terms with your conditioned behavior and the way you've been for every moment of your life up until this point. And very honestly and authentically being able to say to yourself, this is how I behave. This isn't who I am. This doesn't define everything about me, but this is how I spent the majority of my life. So being able to see that and be at peace with that after quite a bit of work through it, and then to be able to work with that conditioned behavior that one has, whatever that may be for you. We all have these personalities and these egos and these prides and these things we defend and these things we fight for and these, the sense of self that we think is so much more important than everybody else's. So we spend our whole lives crafting that. And this practice is like sitting down, getting quiet, holding up a mirror, and being able to look back at yourself honestly and say, this is how I am. Not who I am, but this is how I am. And for me, that's where any spiritual practice begins. Because once you can do that, then you're not running anymore. Because people can run to Buddhism or meditation just like we run to anything else. Everything else clearly hasn't worked. Everything else clearly hasn't fixed you, or none of you would be sitting here right now. So at some point in our lives, for most people, we run to Buddhism thinking that's the thing that's finally going to be it. It's like the search for the Holy Grail. We're finally going to get it. And then you realize, no, that whatever you're searching for has been there with you, inside of you, every single moment of your journey. You just need to see it, look at it, and be okay with it. And that's not fun. So if anyone came here looking for fun, sorry. All right, so with that, we're going to start with a meditation practice. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin the meditation, especially for those who might be brand new. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. Do you want a chair for that foot, by the way? I forgot to ask you. You're good. Okay. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice when you don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to be quiet and still within all of the chaos. Again, for those who are new, your mind doesn't shut off. It will not stop racing. You're not going to go blank. You're not going to think nothing. Your mind will continue to race just as much as it always does. I promise that. I will say things periodically to either wake you up because you've fallen asleep, which isn't the end of the world, or to remind you that you lost some thought and gently help you bring your mind back to present moment. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten, shoulders relaxed. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, same thing, just try to sit up straight. It'll help keep you awake as well. Hands are on the knees or lap. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means you need to move. If you cough, that's fine. If you're sick, just go home. But if you need to cough, you don't need to hide it. Just cover your mouth. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. eventually settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return to breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from your practice. Just sitting, breathing. learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, wanting nothing but to sit and breathe. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, resting, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us. He began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's all we get every day. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. A lot of people can't even go an hour, maybe 10 minutes, without being disturbed by someone. This practice is not always easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as I alluded to earlier. It is direct perception into the present moment and being with life as it arises, which is usually very difficult for most of us because we don't like the way life is arising. So we want to fix it, change it, correct it, manipulate it. So much time trying to control things as opposed to just seeing it for what it is. Life. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do, every moment of your life. The Buddha called this karma. Karma is not what goes around, comes around. Karma is not getting what you deserve. Karma is what you bring into the world. Karma is not what you get, it's what you give. The Buddha taught that karma is generated three ways: body, speech, and mind. The word karma literally means action. That's it. So we bring actions into the world with our body, our speech, and our mind. So this practice, every moment, is simply becoming mindful of our body, of our speech, and of our mind, our thoughts. That just repeats. Never stops, never changes, never goes away. Every moment we have an opportunity to be thinking, speaking, and doing kind words and kind deeds and kind actions, or not. Every moment we have opportunities to be angry and pissed off and throw blame on everyone else in the world and point fingers at everyone for doing everything wrong. And every moment we have opportunities to have compassion for all beings and embrace life as it is and treat people with kindness. really difficult. I mean, it's so simple, but it's really difficult. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything outside of us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world outside of us, life gets simpler. The practice is to begin to surrender control, which is just an illusion anyways, which you think you have, but there's so many people and places and things. We can't even control ourselves half the time, yet somehow we think we can control what other people do. Good luck with that. So I'll pause there. For me, always, I really just prefer responding to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. To those who are joining virtually, again, welcome, glad you're here. Feel free as you are to say hello. There's a chat box there if you have any questions. Put them there and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening and open up to questions. Oh, and I forgot the best part of that story. Was after I said that the person leading was a a-hole, another person standing there said, I forget their exact words, but they said, I agree with that, I think they said I can confirm that. So, again, I'm not using names to protect the innocent, but I love the fact that I can be here in this situation and have that recognized and confirmed. And yet we still laugh and explore our own madness together. So. Questions? Yeah.
So, today I had a relatively good day. Other days that I've come here, I've mostly been a wash or not good days. Today I came in and I was like, you know what, I had a great day today. I'm going to have great meditation. Yeah. I still had racing. My mind was still racing the whole time. It was just positive and or trivial thoughts.
Yeah.
As opposed to negative ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought that my mood would directly affect in a positive way the way that meditation would go for me. That was
Yeah.
the case.
I'm going to paraphrase for those joining virtually, but clearly you thought wrong. But you thought wrong because your view of what you think meditation is completely just needs to be shattered. But let me come back to that. So your question was, usually when you come in here, there's a lot going on with your question, so I want to address a couple of things. But you said usually when you come in here, you've had a bad day or it's kind of a wash, and so, but today you had a good day. And so you came in expecting your meditation to be good, but as you said, your mind was still racing. It just was racing with good thoughts as opposed to bad thoughts or whatever your word was. Is that close enough?
Right.
Yeah, so you want to know what's going on with all that. So a couple things. First off, this is really important because very often people show up to places like this, and again, there's so many Buddhist meditation places in San Diego, almost too many, but there's so many, so I don't care where you go. But the reality is, most people go to places like this not when things are going well in their life. Most people aren't sitting around perfectly peaceful and happy, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to go meditate and find myself. No, they're already good. And that doesn't work with Buddhism anyways because there's no self-defined, so you'd be wasting your time there. But back to your question. Most important, especially early on in practice, and later on, but since everybody's early on, or many are, is to realize that whether we've had a good day or a bad day, it was still a day. Because a good day, or as we call it, a good day or a bad day, is better than what? No day. And a lot of people right now don't get a day. A lot of people right now are going to go to sleep and not get a day. A lot of people went to sleep last night thinking they would get a day, and they didn't. And one day, every single one of us will go to sleep, or at some point in time, we won't have another day. So it's super important to always understand good days and bad days as we label them and judge them and critique them will, of course, play into our thoughts. Practice anyways. Meditate anyways. I'm not even getting to your question, but this is more important. Practice anyways. Meditate anyways. Read anyways. Just your life will be filled with good days and bad days, as you call them. Still cultivate a spiritual practice. So you can really appreciate the good days And also really appreciate the bad days. Because, well, I'll leave that at that. The second piece is, which is very common, especially for those who are newer to meditation. By newer, I mean like 5 years into this practice, is that thinking that some good mood will translate into a good meditation. Now, what that question tells me is you have a very clear construct about what you think a good meditation is, because your example was that you thought since you had a good mood, you were thinking your mind would be like all quiet and calm and still, but it still raced 1,000 miles an hour. It just raced with good thoughts. Beautiful. You sat here for 20 minutes doing absolutely nothing and had good thoughts and felt better and not like shit. But you think you failed at meditation. Correct?
Right.
Correct. You didn't fail at meditation, my friend. You're alive, you're breathing, and I say it every single time, so if you listen to it for about 7 years, eventually it'll stick into your head. But what I tell you at the beginning of the meditation is nothing's going to happen, you're not going to float, you're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. One of the biggest mistakes people make is they think that they meditate, that they're going to empty or still their mind. As long as you are alive, your mind will race. That's it. I mean, technically, from a Buddhist lens, when you die, your mind's still racing, but again, we're not getting into that tonight. Right? So your mind is always going to race. The practice is not to stop the racing mind. The practice is to recognize the racing mind. You ever play that? You know, people still play tug of war where you're like yanking people one way and pulling the other, and you got this. That's your mind. As it wanders, recognize, lost in thought. Back to breath. An example I give often, which I haven't shared in a while, is, so you're sitting there in meditation. Breath in, breath out. Thought arises. There's your thought. Say it's hunger. Recognize that thought. Release it. Come back to the breath. Breath in, breath out. A second later, there's that thought again. Hunger. Recognize. Thought of hunger. Release it. Bring your attention like you're pulling it back to the middle to sensation of breath. This is what I want to do. What I don't want to do. Thought arises. Hunger. I'm hungry. What do I want to eat? I want a burrito. I'm going to go to Pokies. I want chips. I want sauce. Next thing you know, from one single thought, we're sitting there for 5 minutes thinking about a burrito. And we're ultimately hungrier than we were 5 minutes earlier. The problem is not the thoughts. Honestly, I don't care what thoughts you have. They'll make you feel a certain way. But your thoughts don't cause harm. What causes harm? Behavior. Karma, going back to my example of karma, literally means action. And they asked, the Buddha taught that we generate karma in 3 ways. Body, speech, mind. Thoughts, words, and actions. Your thoughts are going to be a mess for years, my friend. Learn to enjoy them. Learn to laugh at them. Learn to cry with them. Learn to be real with them. They don't harm anyone. What do your thoughts often turn into?
Action.
Before we even get to actions, words. Words crush people. And then, not always exactly in this order, but thoughts, words, actions. So, spend the next 5 years knowing that your mind will always race. Just don't act on every single thought. I've been doing prison work 20 years. You know how many people said if I just thought for 1 second longer before I did what I did, their life and everybody else's lives would be drastically different. But we think, speak, and act without even creating space for there to be a gap to breathe with our madness. That makes sense? Yeah. So whatever you thought meditation was, and I never... If 1,000 people lead you meditation, will lead you 1,000 different ways. And I'm not saying some of them are, right or wrong or good or bad, but I'm suggesting that you shatter this construct of thinking that you're supposed to stop your racing thoughts, because then you're going to feel like a failure every single time you do this. And we don't like doing things that we feel like we're a failure at. So, yeah. What else? There's a question here. So there's a question here that says, am I being complacent when I don't let anything bother me anymore, accept situations as they are, and don't let people get to me? No, it's a good question, and I think that obviously every situation, Buddhist teachings are not about just not, and I know you and I know the nature of your, I understand the nature of your question, but just for anybody who's not familiar with this thought, Buddhist practice is not about just not caring. It's not like we're just, I don't care what happens. Buddhist thought and teachings and practice is actually you care about everything. You really do. You have endless love and compassion for everything, everyone, every place, every situation. So the question about complacency, that's really just where you have to watch yourself and say, am I being complacent because I don't let anything bother me anymore? If you don't let anything bother you anymore, that's great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But you just have to watch, is it not bothering you because it just doesn't affect you? Or is it not bothering you because you've just put all these walls up and don't give a shit about anybody anymore? That's what you kind of want to watch. You know, if we just cross off all the people in the world and say, I don't care about any of them, nobody bothers me because I hate everyone, then we're in our safe little perfect Buddhist bubble and we show up around on Tuesday and we think, I'm good. So you kind of just have to watch. But it's definitely not, you're not being complacent because you're not being bothered. And accepting situations as they are and not letting people get to you is that's the practice. That's what we want to do. But again, just be careful that we don't dismiss people or dismiss things. Whether we love them and know them or not. People bring things to you, problems to you, issues to you. There's a lot of disgusting things in this world. We're not closing our eyes to them. So be aware of these situations that arise and don't dismiss it. Have compassion for it, but also try to not let it bother you. So, yeah. What else? Yeah.
Earlier, you mentioned in Buddhism there's no self-defined.
Yeah.
I was curious if you could expand.
Not really. You want myself to expand to yourself, the concept of no self in Buddhism. Perfect. Next question. All right, I'll respond. So there is a very fundamental, it is the basis, it's where Buddhist teachings begins, is the practice of non-self. You ever been mad at somebody? Was it because they did something that hurt you? Right? If there was no self, I'll come back to this, but if there was no self, there would be no one to hurt, right? This idea to start with of non-self is to be very clear that it doesn't mean we don't exist. It doesn't mean that we're not here. It doesn't mean that we're not real. It just means we all exist completely differently from how we perceive ourselves. And when we are born, somebody gives us a name. And they're pointing these fingers at us our whole lives. And they're like, to me, Jeff, Jeff, Jeff. And then eventually I'm like, oh, my name's Jeff. And I have these parents, and I have these brothers, and I was raised in this house, and I live in this city, and then I have these friends, and then I have this. And so I start creating this sense of self that ultimately is just a trillion experiences over a trillion amounts of time that I then put in a box and construct and say, this is Jeff. Right? Now, you have 10 people who know you?
I hope so.
I hope so. Okay, well, let's go with 5 then, just to be safe. You have 5 people who know you, right? They know you exist, you're on this planet, right? So if you lined up all 5 of them, and what's your name?
Jack.
Jack?
Yeah.
And they said, and somebody else said, describe Jack to us. They would all say different things about you. They're not right or wrong. They're just different perceptions of Jack. So if we can begin to see that other people's perceptions of Jack is exactly the same thing as Jack's perception of Jack. That sense of self that we have hung on to so tightly, that builds our ego and our pride, that says we must do this, we must go here, we must have this, we must be there, that all shatters and falls away. But it doesn't mean you cease to exist, and it doesn't mean nothing matters. This is where you have to be very careful. Right? The non-self teachings really gets into the emptiness teachings. The Heart Sutra, you can Google it. It'll take you 30 seconds to read in your whole life to never understand it. Right? That's the whole point. Heart Sutra. Right? But it really addresses the fact that our perception of this self is always changing. You ever been angry and depressed at yourself for like a year? Well, whatever emotion, right? That changes. Emotions come and go. Highs and lows come and go. These are just moment-to-moment experiences that don't define us. They're just experiences. But we live in this world where we think that we have to be defined by who we are. Now, I want to be very careful here to also point out, as a heterosexual white male, I have every privilege in the book. So it's very easy for me to say you can't label or define anything, right? What we come into this world with has a huge, and leaves a huge imprint on people's minds and how they perceive us. And we have to be very careful there as well. Again, coming back to everything matters, everything's important. Pay attention to everything and everyone. So, does that help a little bit to get you started? Yeah. I usually really don't answer that question, so I guess, I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah. Non-self, and again, let me wrap up one more thought on that. This idea of non-self, what it really comes back to is that if you recognize that ego that you've spent your whole life building and defending and trying to like make so perfect, if you can just begin to carve away at that, just polish away at that, then what happens is you suffer less. Because that's what this practice is about. Suffering less. Don't worry about ending suffering anytime soon. It's going to be a while for all of us, you know? I'm not ending suffering anytime. I just think, can I suffer less today than I did yesterday? And the only way I will suffer less is if I become aware of what the Buddha called the three poisons, the second noble truth. The first thing he said is life is filled with suffering. We're all going to experience pain, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction our entire life. Good stuff too, but none of us are here because of all the good stuff, you know. But I'm still glad you had a good day, you showed up, right? But we're here because we suffer, and we want to suffer less. And the Buddha taught very clearly that we suffer what's known as the three poisons: greed, anger, ignorance. So when we make life all about us, me, there's that sense of self, like, you ever helped somebody, helped a stranger, helped a good friend? How do you feel when you help someone? Great. It's just not about you anymore. It's about them. And then when we're done helping people, we're like, did I help them properly? Did I help them enough? Did I help them at the right time? Did people see me helping them? You know? It's like the Seinfeld episode where he keeps putting the tip in. You ever seen it? It's something, gotta be one. Right? Best episode ever. Yeah. You can Google that with the Heart Sutra. What else? Questions?
So,
He started. He was choked up for like 5 seconds before he got it out, so I'm going to let him go. Go ahead.
They realize
come back.
Pokies is still open?
I believe so, yeah. Are you going? Yeah. Is that all you want to know?
Now that you mentioned it. It's been a long time.
Yeah. It has been. I haven't been there in years either. I keep telling that story, and every time I tell it, I get hungrier and hungrier. Yeah. Was that it, or are you good? You're good.
about a burrito. So you say that karma is action.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you describe what people think karma is?
Americans ruin it. Western
Yeah.
culture ruins it. We have the most just disgusting view of karma from a Buddhist lens. It's not even remotely close, because our Western idea of karma is it's the most selfish thing in the world. So there's a comic strip I saw years ago, which I thought was perfect, and it was a person sitting and underneath, he was sitting there, and there were like Stonehenge, kind of stone things going around like dominoes, and the person's pushing this way. So you see them kind of slowly starting to fall as it's going around, very clearly going to come back on this individual, and underneath it says karma. So by that definition, and by what most people think karma is, karma thinks what goes around comes around. Most people think karma is what goes around comes around. Or that's their karma. They're going to get what they deserve. Or those bad people, I hope bad things happen to them. Like, how disgusting. We shouldn't wish bad things happen to anybody. That's just disgusting. There are people who do disgusting things. They have enough torture and hell in their head. They don't need a bunch of other people hating them. Right? So, you ever done something good in your life?
I hope so.
You hope so. I love the honesty here tonight. You don't know if you have 10 people who know you. You're not sure if you did anything good in your life. So, you've done something good in your life. You ever done something good in your life and had something bad happen to you?
Not that I remember.
Someone else. All right, well, let's just assume that one time, 20 years ago, you did something good and something bad happened. You ever done something really bad in your life? There's probably more of those. You ever done bad things in your life?
Nothing comes
No,
to
oh my
mind.
God, you're so full of shit. You're such a liar. Right. Yes, you've had bad, you ever done, no, we're coming back to this. Now, one time you did something wrong. You ever done something wrong and been like, I got away with it. Nobody's going to find out. This is good. I'm good. I'm sure it happened once in your life.
I'm sure it happened.
So bad things happen. We do bad things and a good thing can happen. This simple example shows us that karma is not this immediate what goes around comes around. It's not this, if I do good, I get good. If I do bad, I get good. I just do things. Karma, to me, one of the best examples is playing pool, right? You play pool, you hit the cue ball into the rack. Every time you hit that cue ball into the rack, every ball goes into a different direction. Every single time. Our entire life, we are that cue ball. And we are hitting a rack. Every person, place, and thing that we encounter, we leave an imprint on. If the cue ball is a little bit over this way, balls go a little bit differently. If it's a little bit this way, they all just go off of each other. And we don't know the end result of our karma. Do you know why very traditional Buddhist monks speak so little? Because talking is generating so much karma. Like, do you know how dangerous it is for me to sit here and talk and tell you things? Because I've learned over the years that a lot of people actually listen to what I say. And then they might do some of these things. So then my words are literally impacting your life. That's dangerous. But that's my karma. My action, I am the cue ball speaking to you. You are now processing this. You will determine whether you like it, don't like it, agree with it, disagree with it. But either way, you will have actions that come from everything I say. So I must be very mindful and careful of what I think, say, and do because it impacts everybody else, right? I could say something to somebody and they could go out and do something, get pissed off and run across the street and do something terrible. I'm equally responsible for that. I'm not to blame. Legally, I wouldn't be responsible for that. But if I said something to somebody here and you just got so angry and you ran out and something bad happened, I impacted that. It's not fault. It's not blame. It's not legal responsibility, liability. It's understanding the law of cause and effect. That's all we're talking about. Right? Some Newton dude, right? Every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. Is that Newton? Mm-hmm. I'm a psychology guy. Yeah. So that's karma. We got to be careful, folks. Because our words and thoughts and actions become our reality and they become potentially really beautiful or potentially very harmful. Yeah.
So what is the formula to put better actions into the world?
So the question was, what is the formula to put better actions in the world? I think for me the first step, and you've heard me talk about this in various ways for a while, the recognition of thoughts, words, and actions. Again, not always in this order, but it's always thoughts first. Even though we might do things and say, I wasn't thinking, we were thinking, just not that long. But it's not always speech, because if there are things that we're doing by ourselves or to ourselves, we could have a thought and do an action where speech isn't involved, right? And maybe not communication involved. So you can have thoughts lead directly to actions without speech. The idea, first and foremost, is to recognize what are these thoughts and words and actions that we're doing that are harmful, and spend a lot of time getting to know those, which you are. And for me, the second step is when you begin to see that, is to then be at peace with that and say, wow, I think or I say or I do a lot of really bad things. And just watch it and observe it. I wish that there was some kind of magic little button that just says, okay, I'm going to stop doing all bad things. But as you've heard me say, the recognition of us doing things we shouldn't do is beautiful progress. And if you do 1,000 bad things, my guess is now you only do 900. And so now you got 900 to work with. 800, all right, sorry. And so you work on that. But to think that it's, I wish it was like, okay, here, read page 17 and you're just going to automatically stop doing bad things. A lot of us have been doing bad things for a very long time, and we're just talking about this life. We're not talking about if you get into rebirth, reincarnation, continuation of consciousness. When you look at those teachings, we came in with a lot. If you get into that, if not, it doesn't matter. We've done enough in this life. We don't need to think about past lives, right? But we come in with a lot, so the cards are stacked against us, so to speak. But what you do is you practice patience, you practice self-compassion, you practice forgiveness towards yourself for all the bad things you've done, and you keep working on doing less bad things. Just keep going.
I also think observation is very important, because a lot of times the actions you take, if you're not observing, don't seem bad, and you have to look at the reaction of other people and other things down the line to see if that was actually bad karma, or bad action.
Yes, totally, absolutely. Except, my suggestion is to ultimately in Buddhist teachings, especially with karma, but ultimately good and bad are irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of saying, but yes, I agree. Like the whole 98% of what you said, that to be very aware and observant of our actions and what they become, because we might say or do things that we think are beneficial, and it seems okay in the moment, but then we don't know what's going to happen down the road. And that's what you're saying. What you said was we don't know if it actually is bad. We can't control outcomes of things. The hope is that if we think kind thoughts, speak kind words, and do good deeds, that will cultivate kindness and compassion. But a lot of people don't like kindness. So you could think kind thoughts, speak good words, and do good deeds and still get punched in the face.
Yep.
And when you do, you think more kind thoughts, more kind words, more good deeds. And run so you don't get punched again. Be safe always, yeah.
So, I understand you saying earlier, karma is not what comes around goes around.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to figure out where John Lennon went wrong, if he did. However, is there an element of, because karma is action, so is there an element of responsibility in karma? Or is that, let's say, am I exonerated from responsibility because of ignorance?
No, there's a definite there's a definite responsibility in everything we do.
Mm-hmm.
Karma doesn't bind you to it or liberate you from it. Mm-hmm. Always. And when you say responsibility, to me what that means is to recognize that our thoughts and words and actions have an effect. Mm-hmm. We don't know what that effect is. So we're not free from, it's not so much that we think and say and do things and then we're like, okay, whatever they do, I don't care. No, we have to intimately care about everyone. That's the practice. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes, and so then is that sort of like I guess the Eightfold Path is a purification, and forgive if I'm using the wrong word, but purification as a journey towards nirvana.
Yeah. Well, the purification, what we're looking at, view, thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. Purification, I wouldn't get so wrapped up in purifying yourself. It's not like we're in confession. Or, for me, Yom Kippur, and all of a sudden I've forgiven to God and I'm free from all my sins in one moment,
Catholicism runs deep.
Right. So it's really about, I think, just coming back to, I get it early on, especially we want to learn about the definitions of the words, but I don't suggest heavily getting into trying to define in a box what karma is. Just see it and recognize that everything you think, say, and do has an impact. Again, law of cause and effect. And we don't know what that impact will be. So it creates situations where hopefully we're a little more mindful and aware of what we think and say and do. You know?
And hopefully act accordingly.
And hopefully act accordingly. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Lan. Appreciate the comment. Anything else before we close? Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if I'm going to state this correctly, but you said it's thinking, words, and action.
Yes.
What if, like sometimes I have thoughts that I know are not good, or I don't know what the right term is. But
Yeah.
So
Not beneficial. Not helpful.
Beneficial.
Yeah.
But I still think it.
Yeah.
I'll continue maybe to perseverate a little bit.
Yes.
But I don't act out on it.
Yeah.
Or verbalize it. Is there still an energetic karma to that?
Yeah. No, great question. I mean, I think, and I'll close with this. Ultimately, according to Buddhist teachings, that we generate karma. They say that, so I was trying to sum this up. When the Buddha was alive, 500 years before Christ, 2,500 years ago, for the most part, everybody in India at the time believed in rebirth. They believed in reincarnation. They believed in a continuation of consciousness, whatever language you want to use, or whatever school or culture or Buddhist practice, right? That's just a couple of them. They believed that there was a rebirth. And so, at that time, they weren't showing up to make sure that they got along with family members or a loved one, or they weren't showing up to make sure that they were peaceful and their life went the way they wanted it to. They were showing up because they wanted to be free from suffering. And what was taught was that the only way to be free from suffering was to be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. In other words, to no longer be reborn. Fundamental, ultimate Buddhist teachings is that's when they say the Buddha entered into nirvana, what that means is, at his death, they say parinirvana, meaning nirvana with no remainder, meaning that was his last birth, last life. And ultimately what they're saying is that he neutralized his karma. No more thoughts, no more words, no more actions. Still the body, still the speech, still the mind. So technically, which I want to answer your question technically to my understanding, because you're asking it that way, is that yes, the thoughts are still generating karma. Oh, that's all right. My guess is you didn't come here tonight hoping that you had no more rebirths, right? So that's not, nobody's here, right? But for the most part, we don't wake up and come here and I don't want to be reborn. We come here because we want to be happy, we want to be peaceful, we want to suffer less. That's the reality. That's the world we're all in. And we're not escaping that anytime soon, right? So, if you're able to recognize thoughts that are not beneficial, that are harmful, again, like you said, not good. For me, I always like saying they're harmful to myself or others. They cause harm. Buddhist practice, cause no harm. One of the precepts, right? And this might be mixed in with kind of this purification stuff, is causing no harm. So are my thoughts causing harm to myself or others? Majority of my life, my thoughts caused harm to myself, and then I acted on them and brought that harm into others. So it's a great step to recognize the thoughts and not say them or not act on them. And don't be so worried about this is night one for you, right? So by 3 months in, I wouldn't worry about do I get to nirvana? Yeah. Because ultimately the Buddha's saying we're already in it. This is nirvana, this is samsara. There's no difference, non-self. But, yeah. So I'm going to close on that. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Laura Walsh during her time of rebirth and to Carla and Brenda during their time of suffering. All right, a few quick announcements from our Dharma Bum host, Anna, before you all head out. Thanks, Anna.
Hello, everyone. I'm tonight's host, Anna. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted on the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it, then bring it back whenever you are done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thanks.
Thanks.